Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
I can't promise easy, I told Kaya, staring at the rising sun behind the courthouse annex. I can promise we're walking out of this mess together. She nodded like she knew I was lying about half of that. She was 11, but she'd lived more than some adults I knew. Quick note. Before we continue, share in the comments which city or country you're listening from. It helps us see where you're tuning in from and figure out the best time to post new stories. Thanks. Now let's get into it. My name's Tyrone. I'm 35, from Brooklyn. Single dad. I used to do quality control at a chemical plant in Long Island City until they shut down last fall. Renee, Kaya's mom, died when Kaya was 3. I've been keeping bills moving and grief bottled since. That morning, we drove north in my old Ford with rust in the fenders and one working speaker. 2 bagels between us. Final notices stuffed in the glove box I didn't want to look at. A buddy from church told me about the county surplus auction. Tax foreclosed junk out in the sticks. He said sometimes you can walk out with a deed for less than a month's rent. We hit the BQE at dawn. I told Kaya we were going on an adventure. She just looked out the window and said, "Adventure sounds like something people say when they don't have a plan." She wasn't wrong. The annex lobby smelled like paper and burned coffee. Contractors in puffy vests talked about recreation zones and easement flips like it was Monopoly. A board clerk handed me a bidder card with number 48 on it. Holding it felt like carrying a bet I couldn't cover. I kept my mouth shut and my eyes open. They called out garages, sheds, a bait shop near a lake somewhere. Prices started low, but the flannel crowd had money and didn't blink, dropping a couple grand on a parcel just to flip. Then the auctioneer hit a new lot. Item 142, one residential structure, non-compliant, sold as is, subject to remediation guidelines. Small parcel, back of Millbridge Township. Last titled to Leonard Price. Delinquent 11 years. The screen showed a black and white image of a cottage, faded, leaning a little, half the room already tuned out. Opening bid, 500. Nothing. 400? More silence. 350? I raised my card. The room didn't move. The auctioneer cocked his head, squinted at the county council, and said the words that hit like an engine finally turning over. Accepted. Reserve waived. Subject to remediation. Tax deed issued upon clearance. $42 recording fee due today. I turned to Kaya and whispered, "We just bought a house for less than your iPad." She didn't smile, just said, "Can I draw on the walls?" The clerk walked over, handed me a key and a stapled packet. I'd barely signed the receipt when a woman stepped up beside me, mid-30s, long braids, blue blazer, no county badge. "Angela Monroe," she said. "I'm not county, I was observing. I studied under Dr. Leonard Price. You just bought his place." I blinked. "You knew him?" "I did. He was intense, but right a lot. Why'd you bid?" I looked at Kaya. "Because my kid needs a door I can lock." Angela stared at me a second longer than normal. Then she nodded like she understood more than she said. After she walked off, I stood in the annex with a key in my hand, a receipt in my pocket, and the smallest bit of dignity back in my chest. Like maybe I wasn't just surviving anymore. Kaya looked up at me. "Where is it?" "Millbridge," I said. "Couple hours north. Might not even have heat or running water." She shrugged. "Still beats the mushrooms growing in our bathroom." We got back in the truck, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was stealing oxygen. I just turned the ignition, held that key in my hand, and pointed the truck towards something that had walls. By dusk, we reached the cottage, rolled out 2 blankets, and shut the door against the wind. Kaya fell asleep fast, curled up under the army blanket with her hoodie pulled over her head. I laid there on the hard floor beside her, staring at a ceiling that had seen better years. The boards creaked like they were trying to remember who used to walk over them. I didn't sleep much that night. Every snap or rustle had me wide-eyed, clutching my socket wrench like it was a weapon. We were up with the sun. Kaya poked her head out of the blanket, yawned, and said, "So, is there breakfast? Or do we just pretend we ate? I handed her the last bagel from the glove box and said, "Luxury dining. Enjoy the ambiance." Outside, the hills looked sunburned, just as dry and tired as the land itself. The town of Millbridge was about 15 minutes down a 2-lane stretch that smelled like old cornfields and engine oil. The only gas station on the corner had a flickering sign and a coffee machine that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since Obama's first term. The cottage sat at the very end of a dirt lane, half swallowed by thickets and dry brush. Behind the place, a shallow cut in the earth wound past the edge of the lot like something had once tried to live there. Maybe a stream, maybe a scar. A busted sign hung sideways off a rusted pole. Research area. Authorized access only. The bridge over the creek bed was barely standing. Kaya walked out halfway, bouncing a little just to test if it would collapse under her. It didn't, but it groaned like it wanted to. "Is that a creek?" she asked. "It used to be. Locals say it runs after big storms. Even ghosts have to drink, I guess." The dirt around it was dry and split, but there were thin threads of silver in the gravel, like water had passed through just enough to leave a signature. The front steps weren't steps, they were jokes. Rotten wood, one completely missing. Kaya hopped over a loose plank like it was an obstacle course and said, "We own stairs now." I laughed under my breath and said, "Temporary design flaw. We'll call it rustic." The county key was a stubborn little brute. I had to wiggle it, push my weight against the swollen door, and curse once or twice under my breath before it gave. When it finally turned, the door swung open on a stiff draft that hit like wet paper and mouse urine. The air inside wasn't dead. It was waiting. There was a table with one leg braced by a brick, a metal cot frame in the corner, 2 chairs that wouldn't survive a sit-down, and a corkboard that looked like it had been hung before the internet existed. Faded index cards clung to it by rusted pins. The biggest one said, "Sedimentation logs, upper runoff," in sharp, slanted handwriting. Beside it was a black and white photo of a man standing next to a flow meter in a stream, face hidden by glare off the water. Kaya stepped in and whispered, "It smells like science," and something died. She unrolled her sketch pad without asking and sat cross-legged by the window, already scribbling. I peeked over her shoulder. She was drawing the hills, but not like hills. She gave them eyes. On the counter sat a cracked coffee mug with clear stream faded across the front. Next to it was a mason jar filled with fine gray silt, labeled in faded Sharpie. January 14th, 2013. The handwriting was the same as the corkboard cards. Sharp, measured, like a man who believed in labels more than locks. There was no electricity, no water, no gas, just silence. But not the peaceful kind. It was the kind that made you aware of your own breathing. Every shift, every cough, every shoe scrape echoed like it was being heard by something watching. Angela showed up just before noon, pulling up in a dusty tan Corolla that coughed twice before shutting off. She stepped out with a reusable tote filled with snack bars, Gatorade, and 2 cans of beans. "Did the door eat you alive or did it actually open?" she asked, handing me the tote like we were neighbors. "It fought. I won." She didn't ask permission, just stepped inside and looked around like she'd been here yesterday. This was Price's field base. He ran vertical soil columns right over there. Used the back sink to test for seep contaminants. Had it rigged with inline filters and a washdown tank. She pointed as she spoke, walking the layout from memory. Kaya looked up from her pad. "Was he a real scientist?" Angela paused, then smiled. The stubborn kind. The kind who gets ignored until he's right. I patched one broken window with a piece of cardboard from a moving box we'd used for dishes. Not much good, but better than leaving it open to every cold gust and squirrel with an opinion. Angela walked out back while I worked. She came in 10 minutes later holding a bent metal tent stake and a chunk of broken PVC pipe with a barcode sticker half faded off. "He logged runoff manually out there. No one does that anymore. Everyone's remote now." That night, after Angela drove off, Kaya and I laid out 2 blankets in the smallest room, Probably a closet once. The air was thinner there. Less mildew. I told her we'd sleep here tonight. She looked up at the cardboard-patched window and said, "I'll keep watch on the stars." She fell asleep half an hour later with her hand still wrapped around a colored pencil. I stood on the porch in the dark, listening to the silence wrap around me like something living. I thought about Renee, how she'd have laughed at this whole mess and still told me to push forward. That smell of old wood and dust clung to my jacket. I gripped the railing, felt the rot under the paint, and whispered, "I'll fix you. Just give me time." A wind came down from the hills then, cold, sharp, and fast, and for the first time in a long, tough while, I didn't flinch. I turned and stepped back inside. The next morning, Kaya was still sleeping when I slipped out. I left her a note on the counter. "Back by lunch. Don't burn the house down. Love, Dad." I rolled into Millbridge with $20 and a ripped hardware list on a gum wrapper. The hardware store sat across from a laundromat and a little bar that looked closed even when it was open. The place smelled like motor oil and mildew. A little bell dinged as I walked in, and the guy behind the counter didn't look up. I grabbed a box of roofing nails, 2 tubes of sealant, and a pack of gloves with 3 fingers already bent from hanging too long on the hook. Cost me $11 in change, less than a MetroCard refill. I was about to leave when a voice behind me said, "Heard someone bought Price's place." I turned and saw a woman in a green barn coat, thick braid down one shoulder, maybe mid-60s, eyes that didn't waste time. She held a gallon of eggshell white in one hand and a roll of tape in the other. I nodded. "Yeah, that's someone's me." She sized me up like she already knew where I'd patched drywall before. "I'm Edna Holloway. Lived here 52 years. Knew Price well. Said he fought upstream without a boat." I raised my eyebrows. "That good, huh?" "He was loud when it mattered. Quiet when it counted." She shifted the can of paint. "And he sure as anything didn't trust county suits." Back at the cottage, Kaya was sweeping up glass from the back room like she'd been born to fix things. She'd found a busted wall vent that let in cold air and had already taped a cereal box over it. "There's a calendar behind the stove," she said, holding up a dust-smudged page from April 2014. "It still has his handwriting. Look, he circled Earth Day." She taped it to the wall like it was a painting. I patched the worst holes on the roof with the sealant and a couple scrap shingles I'd found under the porch. Wasn't pretty, but the rain would have to fight harder to get in now. Later that day, I spotted a flyer taped up at the gas station. "Drywall help needed. Route 216, ask for Lou." I showed up in work boots and a denim shirt with one arm bleach-stained. The place was a diner being rehabbed. Smelled like grease and sawdust. Lou handed me a trowel and said, "Let's see if your hands know what they're doing." 4 hours later, I'd earned $120 and a paper sack with a generous slab of meatloaf inside. The cook handed it to me and said, "New folks need feeding." I didn't argue. Later that evening, Kaya and I sat on the floor of the main room, eating by flashlight. The meatloaf was cold, but we didn't care. She chewed slow and pointed to the corner under the cot. "There's something back there." We pulled it out. 3 plastic totes, lids warped but still sealed. Inside, sample vials, soil bags labeled in permanent marker, and a label maker with the strip still hanging from its teeth. The last thing it had typed was Project Clearstream. Kaya sorted through the bags, holding them like fossils. They all have coordinates. Dates too. It's like each one's a clue. The handwriting was small, neat, almost nervous. She turned one label toward the flashlight. "This looks like 1,000 tiny rivers, all trying to say something." I was about to answer when my knee bumped the sink cabinet. One of the toe kick panels clattered loose. Behind it sat a metal lunchbox, gray with rust on the hinges, heavier than it looked. An index card was taped to the top, yellowed and curling at the corners. It read, "If you're opening this, I ran out of time." I didn't open it. Not yet. I just held it in both hands and stared at it like it might breathe. I felt something tighten in my chest, then rise. Like a part of me, the tired, bent-over part, sat up straight for the first time in years. Kaya whispered, "That his?" "Yeah," I said. "Pretty sure it is." My phone buzzed. "Angela." "They're moving faster than I expected," she said. "County execs are fast-tracking a recreation corridor. Outside money's sniffing around. Water rights, mostly." I rubbed my forehead. "We just got here, Angela." "I know," she said. "That's why we move smart. Don't get caught off guard. Not again." She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like someone who'd seen enough people lose before they even understood the rules. After we hung up, Kaya spread her sketch pad across her lap and started a new drawing. She didn't ask me to pose. She just started sketching me by memory, with a hammer in one hand and a paint can in the other. She held it up when she was done. At the bottom, in her blocky lettering, she'd written, "Dad builds the future." Then she blinked twice, yawned, and passed out with the pencil still in her fingers. I sat there next to her, with the lunchbox on one side and her drawing on the other, and stared out the window at nothing. No streetlights out here, just shadows and stars. I'd given her a roof, barely, a space where she could sleep without hearing sirens or feeling the subway shake the walls. I'd finally put a door between her and everything that tried to take too much. But now it felt like this door, this one I fought to earn, was what might bring the trouble right to our feet. By morning, the rain had started. It wasn't much, just enough to make the dirt lanes shine like oil and fill the air with that smell of wet rust. Kaya was tracing Price's old coordinates on a cereal box map when I told her we were heading to town. Millbridge's public library sat across from a tire shop, a low brick building with one flickering fluorescent light above the door. Inside, an old Dell tower hummed like it was fighting for air. The clerk, a skinny man with coffee breath and a name tag that said Castell, asked what I was looking for. "Foreclosure notices," I said. "Property out on County Road 16. He squinted at the monitor, tapping keys with one finger at a time. "That'd be Leonard Price's old parcel, yeah? Been on the rolls since 2014. Tax delinquent. County tried auctioning it twice before this round." "Why didn't it sell?" He leaned back, shrugged. "Nobody wanted it. Heard he used it for some kind of groundwater thing. Folks said he spooked easy near the end." I thanked him and followed the sound of another machine coughing in the back. Microfilm. I scrolled through grainy pages until one image caught my eye. A newspaper clipping from 2009. Headline read, "Municipal Groundwater Integrity Symposium. Dr. Leonard Price delivers keynote." The photo showed a man mid-sentence at a podium, thin and wiry, sun-marked skin, eyes like he didn't sleep much indoors. The caption called him an independent consultant with strong views on aquifer management. I printed the article and stuck it in my jacket pocket. We stopped by Mrs. Holloway's place next. Her farmhouse sat up a small ridge, with two horses that looked like they'd seen every winter since Reagan. She poured us coffee that tasted like it came out of a diesel tank and sat across from me at a kitchen table scarred by decades of mugs. "You've been poking around Leonard's work?" she asked. I found some samples and notes, trying to understand what he was chasing. She nodded slow. He hated shortcuts and corporate charm. Said if you pour poison upstream, you don't get to call it progress. County didn't like him because he talked too much truth. Zenith Chemical came through with their promises, but he called their testing fake. After that, folks said he went quiet. I call it silenced. Kaya drew in her sketch pad while we talked. Mrs. Holloway noticed and smiled. "That's how you keep what matters, honey. You draw it before someone buries it." Back at the cottage, a tan Corolla was parked by the gate. Angela stood under an umbrella, flipping through a folder. "I looked up Price's records," she said. "He lectured at SUNY Albany once. I was in a case study group there. He mentored me on a contamination mapping project. I didn't even make the connection till now." She crouched next to the totes we'd lined up on the porch. "These tags, these are his. I recognize his handwriting. He used to say ink is memory you can't delete. Kaya asked, "So he was right about something bad?" Angela gave a small laugh. He usually was. The rain had slowed by the time she said she had to drive back to the city for a few days. I almost asked her to stay, but I didn't. That evening, Kaya set the lunchbox on the table. "We're opening it," she said like it was an order. I didn't argue. We peeled the tape and lifted the lid. Inside was a folded letter, 4 Polaroids, and a small thumb drive sealed in a baggie. The letter was written in the same sharp hand as the labels. "To the next owner," it started. "If you're reading this, the county took it. I found a signal, solvent breakthrough, in the feeder trench under the east culvert. They'll say it's safe. They'll paint picnic benches over poison. Don't let them build the recreation facade." I read it twice, then passed it to Kaya. The Polaroids showed PVC test wells marked with LP and black Sharpie, dated between 2012 and 2013. The ground in each shot was dry, cracked, but the background looked like this same creek bed. We stared at that thumb drive like it might explode. Later, I stepped outside to haul out a busted door we'd been meaning to dump. That's when I heard tires on gravel. A gray SUV rolled up slow, no plates on the front. The driver's window came down just enough to show a man in a pressed jacket and a tie too clean for this county. "Afternoon," he said. "Martin Greaves, Zenith Chemical. We partner with the county on a few community projects. I heard you purchased Dr. Price's parcel." "That's right," I said, keeping one hand on the door frame. "Good initiative," he said. "That place has history. Can be a burden for a small family. My company can help relieve that. There's always room for negotiation when both sides are reasonable." "What kind of help?" He smiled the way lawyers do when they think you'll fold. "A cash consideration, fair market, plus a little good faith, if you'd be willing to sign a release. No hassle, no waiting." I felt my shoulders go stiff. "I'll think about it." "Of course. I'll leave my card." He held it out through the window, crisp white, embossed logo, and his eyes flicked toward the creek like it owed him money. "Always nice to see a man take pride in ownership. Let's make sure it stays that way." He eased the SUV back down the lane, tires whispering on the wet gravel. Inside, Kaya was watching from the window. "He didn't look friendly," she said. "He's not." We went out later to check the fence line, following the narrow path toward the creek. Halfway down, Kaya spotted something wedged into one of the old posts, a corroded trail camera, lens pointed right at the dry channel. It was still wired to a dead battery pack. "Guess Dr. Price liked to keep watch," I said, prying it loose. Kaya brushed the mud off the casing. So he was watching the water like it was alive. That line hit me harder than she knew. We carried it back inside, set it next to the lunchbox, and started drying it off with a rag. I slipped the letter into a Ziploc bag and placed it under the sink, then pulled out my notebook and wrote a short list. Things that could get us hurt. At the top, I printed in block letters, "Don't meet him alone." I didn't sleep much, but I stayed ready. Boots on, one eye half open. Every creak in the walls made me wonder if someone was testing the lock or just the wind picking a fight. By mid-morning, Angela pulled back into the lane. She stepped out with a prepaid laptop under one arm and a cardboard box marked "Document Supplies." No small talk this time. She walked straight to the table like she belonged there. "We start now," she said, setting the laptop down and sliding in the thumb drive from the lunchbox. The screen blinked to life, and there he was, Leonard Price, maybe 10 years younger, sitting at this exact table. He looked thinner, face drawn from stress or stubbornness. His voice was steady, but his eyes looked like a man who'd been screaming into silence for too long. "If you're watching this," he said, "then the property's changed hands, and I didn't live long enough to testify." He reached back and tapped a hand-drawn map pinned to the wall. "This is the Clearstream corridor. Here's where I found chlorinated solvent spikes, high concentrations after storm runoff, plumes shifting from soil to creek sediment. They'll deny it. They'll rename it. Don't let them. Angela hit pause. He was methodical, she said. Didn't just guess. He built it like a case file. Start logging. We spent the next 6 hours cataloging every soil bag, every vial, every faded label with coordinates that might have meant nothing to anyone else. She had me take photos of everything. Label, sample, storage tote, even the layout on the table. Then we backed up the thumb drive twice. One copy went to her office in the city. The other got sealed in a freezer bag and hidden under a loose board in the floor behind the stove. Angela laid out plastic bags and tags, marking each item with initials and timestamps. Chain of custody matters. One day someone's going to say we faked this. We prove we didn't. We drove the fence line in her Corolla later that afternoon. Mrs. Holloway met us at the curve by the old gate, sitting on the back of a tractor like she was holding court. She pointed with a stick toward a patch of tall weeds. Creek used to run clear through there, she said, until the big boys showed up with their backhoes and pretty picnic signs. Claimed they were doing drainage upgrades. Water turned slick 2 seasons later. Angela took notes. I took photos. Kaya wandered ahead with her sketch pad, humming to herself like the earth wasn't splitting open under our boots. At the far end of the property, where the creek took a shallow bend and disappeared under a broken culvert, the smell hit us. Sweet at first, then sharp, like antifreeze mixed with mold. Angela stepped back. That's not natural algae. That's chemical seep. I pulled the test kits from my bag, cheap things from the hardware store, but enough to get a read. Dipped the strips, waited 2 minutes, then watched them turn colors I didn't like. Yellow to red, green to dark blue. Kaya said, "They changed too fast." "Yeah," I said, like liars caught mid-sentence. We were headed back when a four-wheeler rattled down the trail behind us. A man in a faded hat and dusty overalls slowed up next to the car. "You're the ones bought Price's old place?" he asked. "That's us," I said. "Name's LeClaire. Folks around here say that land's got bad luck." I wiped my hands on my jeans and met his eyes. "Maybe, but I figure luck shows up for people who show up first." He gave a half nod like that answer was something he'd been waiting a long time to hear. Then he rode off without saying another word. Back near the station ruins, Kaya called out. She was crouched in the brush, pointing at something low and square. We pushed through vines and broken branches to find it. A small concrete box, sunken into the dirt. Letters cast into the rebar face read, LP3, one of Price's testing wells. "Third test site," Angela said, brushing off moss. "Probably the most contaminated if he numbered them by discovery date." Kaya stood back and looked at it like it was a tombstone. We shouldn't lose this again. That night, she painted it bright blue with leftover spray from an old school project. Not elegant, but you could see it from the porch now. We wrote "Do Not Disturb" on a stake next to it just in case someone got stupid. Back inside, I boiled a pot of beans while Angela sat at the table, going through her notes. I pulled up a chair and asked, "Let's say this all holds up. What happens if Zenith drags us into court?" She didn't flinch. "We don't play it private. We make it public. Loud. Make it something the county can't bulldoze in the dark." She made it sound like fact, not hope. Later that night, after she left, I sat alone at the table with a stack of receipts and 3 envelopes I hadn't dared open. I counted the money in my wallet twice. $208 left after the last gas run and supplies. 2 debts still breathing down my neck. My hands shook just a little. Not fear, not quite. Just the weight of doing all this on fumes. Kaya padded in from the bedroom holding something folded in her hands. It was a paper frog made out of her sketch paper. She set it on the table and flipped it over. On the belly she'd written in blue marker, "Drink water first." "This is our mascot," she said. "You always said water's what comes before anything else." I looked at her, not sure what to say. "If this turns ugly," I started, "we'll pack it up and go." She crossed her arms. "It's our house, Dad." She wasn't mad. She wasn't even scared. Just certain. Like the walls had decided something before I had. She went back to bed, and I sat there staring at that paper frog until my neck hurt. That night I didn't take my boots off, just in case someone wanted to test if I meant what I said. I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. Kaya's voice, low and nervous. "Dad, come here, now." She was standing in the kitchen, pointing at the floor by the back door. There were muddy boot prints, not ours. Heavy tread, half-dried, headed in a straight line to the table and back. I looked at the lunchbox sitting dead center, except it wasn't where I left it. It had been moved maybe 2 inches to the left. Nothing missing, nothing broken, just touched. It wasn't a break-in, it was a message. Kaya stayed close to me the rest of the morning. I opened the blinds, lit the stove, made coffee we didn't drink. At 8:22 sharp, a knock hit the front door. 3 quick, 2 slow, like the man on the other side had time to think about it. He was tall, brown suit, thin tie, clipboard in hand. Badge said Code Enforcement, County of Ulster. His name tag read Vargas. "Got a complaint," he said flat. "Broken front steps, possible ingress hazard. Need to issue a 24-hour compliance advisory." I stared at him. "You drove out here for that?" He didn't blink. "You'll need to brace the steps or restrict access. Photo documentation required. Compliance failure leads to a fine." I glanced over his shoulder. His eyes didn't follow. They slid sideways toward the creek and then back to the clipboard like muscle memory. He handed me a yellow tag and walked off without saying who complained. By 9:30, I had the front steps braced with cinder blocks and 2x4s. Kaya held the phone while I snapped photos with timestamps, angles, and a little extra attitude. I texted them straight to the number on the notice. 10 minutes later, I got a read receipt. No reply. Then I did what I didn't want to do. I called the number on Greaves's card. He answered like he was expecting me. "Tyrone, I was wondering when we'd speak again." I hit record on the prepaid phone and put him on speaker. "Someone just walked into my house last night. Didn't steal anything. Just left a muddy reminder. Then I get a visit from Code Enforcement this morning, citing unsafe steps. Funny timing." Greaves gave a chuckle like I told a decent joke. "Vargas can be a little overly diligent. He works ahead of the curve sometimes. But you know, Tyrone, all of that can go away. Our offer's still standing." "Which offer is that? The cash for silence or the fake brochure about playgrounds over poison?" "Let's not turn this adversarial. This place doesn't have to be your fight. You've got a daughter to think about." That last part had something under it. Not quite a threat, but close enough I wanted to swing something. Angela came by before noon with a lockbox and a red folder. "Start documenting everything," she said. "Trespass, enforcement pressure, threats. You get it on paper, in photos, in time-stamped messages. No one's going to believe your word alone." She showed me how to padlock the shed and chain the side storage unit. We slipped the sample records and Price's backup drive into double-bagged sleeves, then stashed them under the floorboards with a flashlight and a disposable camera. "You want to keep this alive?" she said. "Make sure someone else can pick up the story if they burn it down." That afternoon, I pulled Price's busted trail cam from the shelf. The battery was shot, the casing bent, but the mount still worked. I fitted a new SD card and fresh battery, then mounted it back in the same fence post where we'd found it. Aimed it low, toward the spot the boot prints had started. It clicked once when I turned it on. I tested the motion sensor, watched the red light blink, and walked away. Angela had set up auto-sync software on the prepaid laptop. I connected the cam's memory card and pushed a mirrored backup to an external SSD, which she took back with her that night. One copy stayed with us. The second stayed off-site. The third stayed with her in Manhattan. Just before sunset, Kaya and I were making toast for dinner when she froze by the window. "There's a truck," she said. "It's just sitting." A rusted pickup idled at the tree line, maybe 50 yards off. It didn't move, didn't flash lights, just sat in the shadows like it belonged there. We turned off the lights, 10 minutes later, it rolled back the way it came. The camera got it. Clear plate number. 2 faces through the windshield. I didn't recognize either one, but they didn't look lost. Mrs. Holloway dropped off a casserole the next morning and handed it to me like she was handing over a blueprint. "They think you're soft because you're new," she said. "Make them wrong." I drove to the sheriff's substation after that. Deputy at the front desk took my statement like he was doing a crossword under the counter. I handed him the flash drive with the truck footage, a copy of the photos, and a written log of the events since the break-in. He said, "We'll look into it," in that voice that meant nothing would happen unless someone got blood on their boots. I kept it simple. "I'm sending the same report to the DA's office, just so it's on record." He stayed glued to his paperwork. I walked out. On the drive home, I spotted the gray SUV again. Greaves behind the wheel, like some lobbyist pretending to be neighborly. He gave me that politician smile, like we were in on the same long joke and I just hadn't laughed yet. I gave him nothing. Just stared like I had a hammer behind the door and a reason to swing it. Back at the cottage, I found a glossy brochure tucked under my wiper blade. Millbridge Recreation Partnership, Trails Where Families Thrive. Front cover showed smiling kids in canoes and fake families hiking past water that probably never ran that clear. The logo in the corner? Zenith Foundation. I didn't throw it away. I walked inside, taped it to the plywood wall over the sink, grabbed a Sharpie, and wrote in big block letters across the front. Not for sale. I left that brochure taped to the wall like a warning label. Angela came back 2 days later, handed me a thick envelope and said, "Don't lose this. Foil packets, drainage permits, partnership memos, access grants. County's got its fingers in 5 pies and 2 of them reek." I stuffed the forms into a mailing envelope, added a copy of our log sheets, and walked it down to the post office in Millbridge. The clerk behind the glass read the label, grinned without smiling, and slapped on a tracking sticker like he'd seen this movie before. "Good luck," he said, sliding the receipt under the glass. "Sounds like you're kicking something big." "Yeah," I muttered. "Something that doesn't want to be kicked." Back at the cottage, Angela spread out the contents of Price's totes across the table. Kaya helped organize while I read labels out loud. 27 pages of field notes, Angela said, flipping through a bundle clipped with a rusty binder. 14 soil bags, all with coordinates. 3 well caps. Look at this. He wrapped the dates in tape like someone was going to try peeling them off. Each cap had a code stamped into the metal. LP1, LP2, LP3. Kaya stacked them like poker chips and said, "They look like they belong to something that's still breathing." I opened the last tote. Inside was a black notebook, spiral-bound, cover rubbed to gray. Clearstream 3 written in pencil, barely hanging on. Angela leaned in as I turned the pages. His handwriting was tight, left slanted, the kind of script you write when you don't want emotion to slip through. On page 7, I stopped reading and just stared. Then I read it again. Noticed blend pattern matches degreaser class solvents used in parts washing. Source strength stronger post-rain. Suspect modified runoff route. My stomach dropped. That stuff, chlorinated solvents. That was the same chemical category we used to test in the plant back in Long Island City. I remembered the barrels, the chemical sheen that never came out of your clothes. I remembered signing off on a vendor shipment once. The company etched on that ID tag, Zenith Industrial Solutions. It felt like my past had walked up the porch steps and let itself in. Angela glanced up from her notes. "You okay?" I nodded, jaw tight. I used to check off inventory from a vendor tied to Zenith. That stuff price logged? I've seen it before. I just didn't know it had followed me here. She didn't say anything right away, just tapped her pen twice against the notebook and said, "Then maybe this fight picked the right guy." Later that afternoon, she set up a Zoom call on the laptop. Name on the invite, Darlene Wexler. A woman in her 70s answered, wearing a faded hoodie and glasses thick as a windshield. She froze when Angela showed her a still from the first video. "Is that Leonard?" she asked, voice cracking halfway. Angela nodded. "We found it in his lunchbox. It's part of a drive he left behind." Darlene didn't speak for a full 20 seconds, just stared and blinked hard. Then she said, "He told me once if anything happened, he'd leave a trail for someone stubborn enough to follow it. Check under the pantry. He used to call it Plan Z. That's where he kept the backups." I slid off the laptop, grabbed a crowbar, and pried up the warped plank under the pantry sink. A thin metal tube was wedged between two floor joists, wrapped in cloth. Inside, 3 microfilm rolls sealed in plastic sleeves and a bank envelope from Ulster County Credit Union, postmarked 2015. I held it up like I'd just unearthed a secret no one wanted found. Angela whispered, "We got him, and now we carry it." That night, Kaya sat curled up on the couch with her sketchbook while I opened the thumb drive again. 5 videos in total. The second one started with Price leaning closer to the camera. "If you're seeing this," he said, "I didn't get my day in court." He looked exhausted. Face older, voice slower. But there was no hesitation in what he said next. "They cut a channel from the dump site straight into the public trench. Said it was storm diversion. I checked the permits. They were forged. Contractors worked weekends to avoid inspectors. I tracked concentrations at 3 points, all rising, all invisible to county meters. They're pretending the readings are normal because the sensors were placed where nothing flows." He named names, supervisors, contractors, dated work orders, even listed a project supervisor from Zenith by full name, someone still listed on their company website. Angela let the video run to the end, then closed the laptop. "This is a bomb, Tyrone. We don't rush it. We wire it legal." She pressed the envelope of microfilm against the table and looked me dead in the eye. "You keep living normal. You fix what you can. You meet neighbors. You stay human. They expect a fight. They don't expect a home with roots." I did what she said. Took a roofing job up near Holloway's neighbor, a red barn with a crooked cupola. The guy paid me $220 and sent me home with a bucket of apples from his orchard. That night, Kaya dragged her chart to the table. She'd drawn the entire stretch of the creek from Price's notes, colored pencil lines in blue and red. On one side, she wrote, "Dad's side." On the other, "Their side." I taped it to the wall next to the Sharpie-scarred brochure. That was our war map now. That Sunday, we drove down to Brooklyn to grab a few more tools and check our old mailbox. I sat in the back pew at church while Kaya ran off with the other kids. Pastor Rubin spotted me right after the service. "How's the place up north?" "It's work," I said. He smiled at that. "Good kind?" "Hard kind." He patted my shoulder. "Sometimes they're the same." We drove back that night. Kaya fell asleep before we hit the thruway. When I got home and hung up my coat, I found something folded in the inside pocket. $146 in mixed bills and a note that just said, "For the nails and the fight. Don't quit." Angela showed up early that morning, briefcase in one hand, 2 coffee cups in the other. She handed me one and gave me a once-over. "That the shirt?" "It's the only one without drywall dust or frog paint," I said, brushing off a thread like it mattered. "You look like a guy who doesn't blink." "That'll do." We drove to the county building in her car. Kaya's drawing of the creek folded in the glove box like a map that mattered more than any zoning plan. The hearing room was small, cramped, paneled in wood like they were trying to look important without spending real money. About 30 folding chairs, 2 microphones, and a long table for the planning board. I saw Greaves the second we walked in. Slick gray suit, polished shoes, hair combed so tight it looked like it hurt. He was laughing with someone from the Parks Department, pointing at the corridor map like it was already his. Angela leaned toward me. "They put us 6th on the agenda. They're hoping we get tired and leave." I folded my arms. I brought 2 sandwiches and 6 years of being broke. Let's see who folds first. We waded through zoning approvals, roadwork budgets, and a heated debate over parking meters in Ellenville. When they finally called our parcel, Lot 1278, potential inclusion in recreation corridor, Greaves stood up like he'd already won. He walked to the mic with that tight smile. Zenith Chemical has long invested in community resilience. This corridor project promotes access, family wellness, and economic uplift. We're excited to see so much shared opportunity, especially with legacy parcels like this one. Angela muttered. He's dressing contamination as community wellness. Greaves kept talking about families and trails, like no one would notice the creek underneath. He waved toward the board and sat down, like he'd just delivered a bedtime story. Then Angela stood. 3 minutes. That's all they gave her. She walked to the mic like it owed her money. My name is Angela Monroe, environmental attorney, former student of Dr. Leonard Price. I'm here representing Mr. Tyrone Bell and his daughter Kaya, current legal occupants of parcel 1278. This parcel is not abandoned. It's active, it's monitored, and it's contaminated. A few heads turned. She lifted a folder and held up a test strip, sealed in a bag. These are live samples taken within the past month. Chlorinated solvents at unsafe levels in soil and runoff. She snapped the folder open. These are FOIL-obtained emails linking Zenith's donations to the corridor map updates. These are Dr. Price's academic credentials, his field notes, and a signed letter warning of contamination cover-up. The room got quieter with every word. She stared the board down like she wasn't asking for anything, like she was informing them. We request a full pause on any groundwork or zoning movement until third-party testing is completed. The chair shifted in his seat and cleared his throat. Well, Ms. Monroe, this board doesn't have that kind of enforcement power. Then I'm speaking for the record, she said, because records outlast silence. She walked back without waiting for acknowledgement. Greaves didn't look so relaxed now. Angela turned to me. We're not done. We headed to the courthouse that afternoon and filed a petition for a preliminary injunction. The clerk shuffled through the paperwork, stamped dates, nodded once, and sent us up to room 2E. A district judge in his 50s read the motion, raised his eyebrows, and asked for affidavits by both parties. Angela handed him a thumb drive labeled Video Exhibit A. He plugged it into the courtroom TV cart, and the screen blinked blue before Price's face filled it. It was the second video. He sat at the same table we sat at now. His voice was lower, wearier, but every word landed like a stone through glass. They want to rebrand contamination as open space, he said. I'm not signing the lie. The year is 2015. The chemicals are trichloroethylene and perc. The readings come from coordinates listed in my logbook and confirmed 3 separate times. If you're hearing this, then no one stopped them in time. You could feel it. The air change. The room didn't move, didn't cough, didn't blink. Greaves stopped smiling. The judge leaned back, folded his hands, and said, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order on any activity related to Parcel 1278. Independent environmental testing to be conducted within 10 business days. This court wants hard answers before anyone builds so much as a bench. We walked out without speaking. I held the door for Angela, and she looked at me like she was measuring if I'd break now or later. I didn't. Outside the courthouse, a reporter with a notebook and a lanyard jogged up beside me. Name? He asked. Tyrone Bell. Quote? Write that I'm not moving. Angela didn't laugh, but I caught the corner of her mouth twitch. She squeezed my hand by the stairs, just once, then let go. For a second, it felt like the whole machine of the county, Greaves, Zenith, the board, all of it, stuttered, like someone kicked dirt in the gears. That night, I fixed the front steps. No more tape, no more cinder blocks. I cut and braced and sanded until they held under both our weights. When I was done, I put on a pot of beans, turned on the small battery radio, and sat at the table with Kaya. She stirred her bowl and said, What's a TRO? It's a pause long enough to tell the truth. She smiled. That sounds like a good kind of pause. It is, I said, if we use it. The TRO ink was barely dry when the knock came. Courier, neatly pressed shirt, clipboard, Envelope labeled, confidential offer, private recipient only. You, Mr. Bell? Depends who's asking. Just need a signature confirming receipt. I read the first line of the letter. Buyout offer 6 times what I paid, plus relocation support, no strings, and a clause about future non-disclosure. I took his pen, signed the bottom corner with one word. Refused. Handed it back and shut the door. Didn't even say goodbye. An hour later, a mini excavator rolled down the lane, followed by a utility truck with cones and hazard tape. 3 guys in neon vests climbed out like they were expecting a photo op. One of them waved and shouted, "Erosion control assessment!" 5 minutes behind them came Vargas, same clipboard, same smug shuffle. He didn't even look at me. Routine site maintenance for the corridor's water table assessment. Nothing to worry about. We're under a TRO. He flipped a page on the clipboard and shrugged. Doesn't show up in my system. I let it pass. I called Angela. She didn't curse. She didn't panic. She just said, "I'll call the clerk. Don't touch them. Keep the cam running." 42 minutes later, a deputy cruiser rolled up. Window down, TRO copy in hand. "You boys need to shut it down," he said, tone flat. "Judge's order." The contractor tried to talk his way out of it. "Probably a scheduling error. Misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," the deputy said. "You're trespassing." They packed up fast, muttering the whole time. I didn't say a word, just stood with my arms crossed while Kaya filmed them pulling the cones. Word spread quicker than I expected. That evening, Mrs. Holloway rolled up on her tractor with a basket of fresh rolls. She parked it by the fence line and just sat there with her thermos like she was on patrol. Then came Mr. LeClaire on his four-wheeler, 2 dogs riding in back, radio playing old country. He waved once and sat on the tailgate. By sundown, 10 folks had shown up. Some from the church, a few neighbors, 2 I didn't even know. They all brought thermoses, folding chairs, and the same tired look I saw in my own mirror most mornings. "We're just hanging around," one guy said. "In case anybody forgets, this place isn't empty." Even Deshawn drove up from the city the next day. Big guy, tattooed arms, street in his voice. "You want me to lean on some of these clowns?" he asked. "I know a couple guys doing side gigs for Zenith. They make the call. They stop showing up." I shook my head. "We play this in the light. No shadow moves. No threats. That's what they want. Something they can twist." He looked disappointed but nodded. "Respect, cousin. I just don't like watching you get squeezed." Neither did I. That weekend in town, Greaves cornered me outside the feed store. "Mr. Bell," he said, all charm and white teeth, "I want you to know we still see a path forward. In fact, Zenith would be happy to fund a scholarship in your late wife's name. Something lasting, something generous." I stepped in close. "Her name isn't for sale. Neither is this land. Find another family to buy out." He smiled, but his eyes froze over. Kaya painted a signboard that night. Big wooden panel, blue and white letters, frog logo in the corner. Dr. Price's promise, water first. She stuck it at the end of the lane, hammered it into the soil herself, then stepped back and saluted it like it was a flag. I didn't ask why. I just stood next to her until the sun dipped low enough to paint the hills the color of rust. Later that night, we opened the last Price video. He looked rougher in this one, pale, tired, but still steady. "If this land ever belongs to someone who can say no," he said, "say no, and put it where they can't dig." Angela sat back from the laptop. "That's your easement clause right there." She'd already reached out to a land conservation fund. Small, but legit. If we wanted, we could transfer a conservation easement over the creek bed and surrounding woods. That would protect it from future development and still let us live here. We wouldn't own the right to wreck it. That part would be off the table, permanently. That night, I sat at the table, looking at everything all at once. The sagging gutter, the wall cracks, the busted doorknob that never quite latched, the offer letter still sitting on the counter, crisp and untouched since I handed it back. Kaya was asleep on the couch, paper frog on her chest, one sock halfway off. I picked up the letter, looked at the numbers, the lawyer talk, the deadline. Then I tore it in half and let the pieces fall on the floor. "This is a home," I said out loud, to no one. "Not a quarry, period." The next morning, Angela brought the paperwork. We started the easement process that same day. The independent tests came back clean, in the worst way. Chlorinated solvents, right where Price said. His logs weren't guesses. They were warnings. The state got called in. The feds showed up next. One reporter from a national environmental desk called me 3 times before I finally answered. He wanted quotes. I gave him the truth. The guy was ignored while the ground got poisoned. My kid almost lost a roof because of it. Now they can clean it or own it. My phone didn't stop for 3 days. Zenith's PR team put out the usual apology. We take this seriously, and we remain committed to community partnership. But nobody bought it. Not after the judge made the consent order public, funding cleanup, canceling the recreation corridor. Greaves stopped smiling. Word got out that he'd moved on to new opportunities, which was code for, "We can't keep you around after that kind of camera time." The county tried to pretend they'd been with us the whole way. The chair shook my hand with a smile like we were war buddies. I didn't clap when they gave their little speech. I waited for the mic and said what needed saying. I want to thank the folks who actually stood up, the ones with boots in the mud and their names on nothing. Mrs. Holloway, the LeClairs, Angela Monroe, and the man who left a letter in a rusted lunchbox because he didn't get his day in court. Angela and I stood under the porch light that night. The bulb buzzed once, weak and yellow. I looked over at her and said, "I haven't liked anyone in a long time." She didn't say anything fancy, just stayed right there next to me until the bulb flickered out, and we walked inside together. Kaya finished the final coat of paint on the creek sign the next morning. We signed the conservation easement that afternoon. On the official maps, the parcel's labeled Dr. Price's Promise. She used my old phone to take the first photo, one she framed later in her sketchbook. We made the big call after that. No mining, no carve-outs, no deals behind curtains. We gave the creek banks and the well sites to a land trust, but we kept the cottage. We kept the life around it. By spring, the place didn't look like a war zone anymore. It looked like something new. Angela filled out the nonprofit paperwork, and we turned the cottage into Renee's house for clean water, named for the woman who never got to see Kaya grow tall or watch me get my feet under me. We cleared brush, patched the roof, installed a ramp with the help of a local grant. Holloway brought a bench her son built in his shed. A science teacher from the middle school asked if her class could install a test station. I said yes before she even finished asking. Kaya led the first tour in a frog pin and a wide-brimmed hat. She stood by the painted sign and told kids about ghost plumes and real rivers. They listened like she was leading them through buried treasure. On our first open day, she placed a mason jar on the table with a taped label that said, "Renee's Fund for Field Kids." I watched little hands drop in crumpled dollars, loose change, a folded note that read, "Thanks for letting us see it real." I still took odd jobs, roofing, repairs, hauling for neighbors. I still owed, still worried about heat and tires and fees that don't go away just because you did something right. But I didn't feel small when I locked the door at night. Kaya would fall asleep with her head on Angela's shoulder, radio playing low, and I'd sit by the stove and say it quiet, under my breath, just like a prayer. We made it a home, not a mine. What would you fight for if everyone told you to just walk away? Your home, your truth, or your peace? If this story hit you, drop a comment. Tell us what you'd do, or just write that the story was good. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories like this one, hit that like and subscribe. It's only one click for you, but it means everything to us.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.